twizzle with me.
Everybody starting doing the twizzle. Everybody, if you're ready to sizzle, you twist a little and you twist a lot, and when you really get hot, that's the twizzle. Twizzle, twizzle.
Weeknights starting at 9/8 Central on MeTV.
Hello, I'm John Malos, and welcome to Connect with me on this Monday morning, live on the showroom floor at Ventura TV. You're watching us on Comcast 187 and 43.6. Today, it's on the air, off the presses. We're going to talk to a former newsman, a journalist who's written 2 books, and he now works for PG&E. And we welcome your phone calls here the weekend after Thanksgiving. Area code 559-265-4331. Back with our mystery guest in just a moment.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
As you know, each and every Monday we talk to a member of the media. We call it On the Air, Off the Presses, and each Monday we get differing viewpoints about what's going on in the media as far as the newspaper industry is concerned, as far as the radio industry is concerned, and most certainly television, and how television news covers news events now as opposed to what happened or what used to happen years ago, back in the 50s and 60s, before I was born. No, not really. But anyway, today's news with, Twitter and Facebook and all the social media and access to media sites. I mean, information flows so fast, and you have to be careful what information you're believing and reading. What's true? What isn't true? Anyway, today's guest is a former journalist. He's a reporter. He worked in the broadcast television industry, news industry, for the better part of 15 years, from 1979 to 1994. He worked in 4 different markets. He started in Binghamton, New York, and he is from upstate New York. We'll talk to Steve Newvine in just a moment. He also became the head of the Chamber of Commerce right here in the city of Fresno. He was the head of the chamber in Merced, where he now lives. And what does he do now? He works for PG&E, and he is live in our studio right now. I'm talking about Steve Newvine. He is also an author. Forgot to mention that. He's written 2 books. He'll be here to take your phone calls. The 2 books are right here. We're not going to talk too much about the books. We'll invite him back again on a Wednesday when we have Arts and Culture Day. He wrote a book about the experiences of the Central Valley right here and going home or growing up in upstate New York. We'll talk to Steve Newvine. He is a former journalist and has his hand right in it. He knows all about television news and radio. He also dabbled in radio during his broadcasting career. We're going to take your phone calls, 559-265-4331. What's on your mind this Monday morning that is irritating you? Call in. Give your opinion. Ask Steve his opinion. We're back with Connect with Me in just a moment.
Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're the save energy, save time, save money place. The Energy Star qualified, ready steam equipped, high efficiency Frigidaire affinity place. You heard right. Right now, save big on select Frigidaire laundry pairs and pay no interest when paid in full within 6 months. At the hometown low price, think outside the big box place. Since 1951, Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're working hard to be your place.
It is Monday morning, and it's your opportunity to get everything off your chest. Call in. The phone line, well, it was, I think, full just a moment ago, but now as I see it, the phone line is open, and let me give that phone number out one more time. Area code 559-265-4331. 4331. Hard to see this on the reflection here from the lights, but the phone line is open. Steve Newvine is my guest today on Connect with Me. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming. How was the drive from Merced? Pretty good?
A little foggy just south of Merced, but things cleared up in Madera, and we got into Fresno with no problem.
Hey, we already have a phone call.
Oh,
Let's
great.
take it and see who is
Great.
on the line here. And, of course, our number is 559-265-4331. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. What's your question? Hello?
Hello. Can an explosion around here? He works for PG&E, right?
Yeah, he does work for PG&E. Do you have a question? I don't know if he can take it, answering questions about PG&E, but what is your question, sir? What's your question?
Well, can an explosion like what happened in, I think, Bel Air happen in Fresno, a neighborhood in Fresno?
It could probably happen anywhere, right, Steve?
Oh, I'm sure it could. Yeah.
I'm sure he's talking to you.
2 years ago now.
Yeah. All right, well, do you have a media question for Steve?
Well, how long has he worked for PG&E, and
Well,
how did he get a job with PG&E?
Well, I haven't worked there for very long, and it's really not why I'm here today. And I'm not in a company. I'm not in a company capacity today.
Right.
So it's really not appropriate for me to be answering any questions
Right.
regarding that. But
Sorry
yeah,
about
to get to work there, you do what I did. I applied online, and somebody called me in about 6 months and offered me a job, or offered me an interview that led to a job, and that's why I'm working for them now.
Right. All right. Thank you for your phone call. I really appreciate it. I'm sure he's referring to the San Bruno incident where he had the explosion. And of course, we had one back in Massachusetts just this past week. A natural gas pipeline, I guess, blew up. But that can happen anywhere, Steve.
Yeah.
Not just, in San Bruno, anywhere in the country.
Sure.
It's not limited to one area.
No, and it's unfortunate what's happened, on the East Coast now with all of that activity, and then of course you have this incident you talk about, and it's just been incredible just to see, the kind of magnitude of some of these things that happen, and how the utilities and all the first responders really
Yeah.
get on there and make things happen.
I shouldn't have mentioned that you work at PG&E.
I know.
We're going to get PG&E questions now because you're not representing the kind of. Let's take another phone call and see what's going on here. Hang in there, Steve. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. What's your question for Steve Newvine? I hope it's not about PG&E.
No, if it could be more exact about this legislative pay that I heard about, that it's going to swing one way and then swing back the other way. How do they do that?
I didn't hear the first part of that question.
Yeah, go ahead and repeat your question. Steve didn't get
it's
it.
about the pay, that legislative pay. I guess they're going to lose pay and then they're going to get their pay right back. I mean, how can they do that? Do they vote for themselves or something?
Who are you talking about?
The legislators, aren't they going to lose pay some kind of on December 1st or something?
The state legislators.
Yeah, and then they're going to get their money back. I mean, is that what I was reading? Was I reading that right?
I thought I was reading the same thing, but I'm not sure. What's your take on that, Steve?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with what that all entails, but certainly the legislature has, on all levels, it seems, has an image issue to deal with, and some of the actions, I think, sometimes just speak louder than what's actually happening, and we're seeing it now on a national level as well. It's just, are we serious about sitting down talking about our budget and our deficits and our social spending? Or can we really come together? And I think the next few weeks are going to see that become the big topic of discussion. How are we as a country serious about some of these issues that are coming forward? And we've had about 4 years of talk about all of this, and
Right.
now we really got to take some action.
Right. Now, I want to clarify here before we take another phone call, and that is today's guest is Steve Newvine. He's a former television news journalist. He knows what he's talking about when he talks about the media. He is an author. Yes, he works for PG&E. However, we're not here to talk about PG&E today because he's not representing the company in that capacity. So we'll take your phone calls regarding anything to do with the media, regarding politics and how the media covers politics. So call in at 265-4331, and certainly a lot to get to. Now, Steve, when did you get out of the media?
I got out in 1994, and I was I was an executive producer. At a
You got out
station.
altogether, cold turkey,
Yes,
huh?
yes.
Wow.
I had changed jobs. I had worked at one station for about 7 or 8 years, and I had an offer at another station in the same city, And I thought, wow, this is what I need. I need
Rochester, New York?
In Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
So I went from the ABC affiliate to the CBS affiliate. And 6 months into that new job, I just knew deep down that this business had outgrown me, and I just felt like,
why?
Well,
Why? How so?
Well, it's funny to say that now as I look at myself in the monitor and see this gray hair, but I really felt like I was too old for the business, or that more and more younger people were coming on board. Now I was in my 30s.
Did you feel like the younger generation was able to outrun you?
I felt there was
there
was a perception on the part of station management, in my opinion, that they were that the younger folks coming in could do it faster, smarter,
quicker,
better, and I dealt with that a little bit at my previous station, and then I moved to this other station thinking it would change. And
the question is, did you believe that?
No, I never believed that. And I even when I was a younger Turk, I always admired the folks who had the 10, 15, 20 years experience, because they were the ones that really had seen the 60s go play itself out. They had seen television news develop from what black and white slides practically to film, and in fact one of the stations I worked at was just phasing out film as I started, so I got to work on film for maybe 3 weeks, and then it was all
you and I are the same generation. I worked in the film generation, started there, then they went to a 3/4 inch tape, and of course now everything is digital. There is no such thing as tape. I mean, you do everything on you can tape something, a news event, on your cell phone and play it back on the air, as happens now, of course, across the media spectrum, as they say. Steve Newvine is my guest, former journalist. Your phone calls encouraged here at 559-265-4331. Glad to have him here. He drove in the fog today from Merced to get here. He's an author. He now works for PG&E. But forget I said that, because we're not talking about PG&E today. We've already done a show on that. We'll do it again sometime in the future. We're back in just a moment.
The great detective Remington Steele, he doesn't exist. I invented him.
The woman behind the man, Miss Laura Holt.
Until the day he walked in, with his blue eyes and mysterious past.
Remington Steele is an elaborate ruse. He does not exist.
We never mix business with pleasure. Well, almost never.
I think it's time they found me.
Remington Steele, weeknights at 8, 7 Central on MeTV.
Steve Newvine comes from my generation. That's why I can relate to him so well. And so, Steve, what's wrong with television news today as you see it?
Well, I don't know if I'm the one to say what's wrong with it. I'll tell you what bothers me more than anything else about today's media is that they're so focused on driving their viewers to other media and not the television screen. There's always a pitch to the website, always a pitch to getting more information by going to our website. And I'm just wondering if the viewer sitting back there is saying, do I stop watching now and go to the website? I think television.
In other words, what you're saying is they'll give you a story and they say, for more information on that story, go to our website at abcnews.com. Well, why don't you just give it to us now?
If it was that important, you should give it to us just
all right, take a quick phone call here with Steve Newvine, former whoops, I guess they went away. I keep saying former journalist. Yeah, once a journalist, always a journalist.
Well,
right?
Right, and that's why I continue to write. And I write. I also write on a local website.
Right.
People,
so I shouldn't say former because, but I mean former television news journalist.
I don't make my living, my primary living from that. But you're right. Once you're a writer, once you're in that business of asking questions, gathering information, I don't think you ever lose it. You just keep doing it in a different way.
All right. We'll see if this phone call is going to work this time. I think it is. Good morning. You're on Connect with me. How are you?
Hi. I'd like to know, what was his most memorable story or interview that he's done?
Oh, great.
Good question.
Yeah, it is very good, because I can think of about 3 or 4 things right away. I think the most memorable one, though, was interviewing the first space shuttle crew when they returned from the first mission, which I covered in Huntsville, Alabama. I worked at an ABC affiliate. Huntsville is the home of the Marshall Space Flight Center. They managed the production of the solid rocket boosters and the external tank and part of the main engines.
Did you drive to Florida to see the takeoff?
No, I didn't get to do it. We talked about doing that, and it kind of became a budget issue within the station.
Now, who did you interview as part of that crew?
That first crew was Robert Crippen.
Okay, I remember him.
Yeah,
yes.
And John Young.
Yep.
And it was a two-man crew. And interestingly enough, last summer of this year, 2012, at the at the Challenger Learning Center in Merced, California, Atwater, California, one of the members of the last space shuttle crew was the guest speaker. And so afterwards, I introduced myself, told him a little bit about that interview I had done, 20 plus years prior, and he told the story about how after that last mission, they brought those two astronauts together with the last crew and had a group picture taken. And he pointed out, he says, you're probably one of the few people in the world who's interviewed both the first and the last.
Yeah.
And so that's what was memorable for me, because I had that connection.
Now, that first crew, there were a lot of skeptics as to whether or not the space shuttle would work, the space station, all of that kind of stuff. Do you remember that?
Yes.
How skeptical people were across the country? Why are we doing this? Why are we spending billions of dollars on a space shuttle?
Oh, sure.
And what did they think at the time?
Well, in Huntsville, Alabama, they were very sensitive to that, because it was a company town. That's where you take away the space program, and which in effect is what's happened now, and you've dealt a serious economic blow to taking away some major industries there. And that was a very valid argument versus the side of space exploration, taking the space program to the next step. A lot of people don't realize the shuttle really was designed to kind of make space travel routine. It wasn't going to be so much a special thing to go to the moon or go to different places, but we were able to go back and forth. And I think it didn't live up to all of its expectations, and certainly the tragedies had something to do with it.
Space shuttles go down.
Yeah, that's it's a very serious thing to put a man into flight. And I've talked to scientists who believe the science you get from manned space flight is minimal compared to how you can do it with unmanned space probes and that kind of thing. But I think America has this passion and this affection for the idea that we were the ones that really blazed that trail.
We went to the moon, and the only ones that have been on the moon. The only ones after all these years, since 1969. No other country has landed on the moon but us. And we have another phone call. Let's take the phone call before we go to break and see what this is about. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. How are you? What's your question for Steve?
Steve, are we in an intel? I have a hard time pronouncing the word. Since Obama won, would he give some information? Number one, why he won the nomination, the presidency, and why there are more liberal newscasters than conservative, and the reason why that is entitlement. Are we in an entitlement society? Now, I don't know if that's his subject that he covers. If he could, fine. If not,
okay. We'll talk about that. I appreciate the phone call, but what we're going to do is we're going to let everybody take a deep breath, and we're going to answer that when we come back here on Connect with Me. We're talking with Steve Newvine, and we'll answer that question when we come back in just a moment.
Is taking care of laundry taking too much of your time?
Have you become a missing mom? With a new fast, efficient washer and dryer from Ventura TV Video Appliance, you'll spend more of your day the way you want.
This Amana Super Capacity Washer Dryer Pair is now just $6.99, and this heavy-duty Maytag Super Capacity Washer Dryer Pair is only $8.99.
Don't spend your life on laundry. Upgrade today at Ventura TV Video Appliance and save.
A call came in just before the break, and the question is, Steve, the first part of that question would be, how and why did President Obama win re-election, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think it had as much to do with a very well-organized campaign. And I think a campaign that has actually been running for 6 years. If you look back at when he first decided he was going to run for president and won that first election, won the re-election, the results surprised me. I really thought the voters would get in and use that, are we better off now than we were 4 years ago, kind of question, and just answer that.
But also part of it was, I mean, I've often thought about this. Is part of the reason that Romney lost is because he got beat up in the primary by guys like Newt Gingrich?
I think that had a lot to do with it. I think that was a contributing factor. Certainly, he was fending off people in his own party when he could have been, of really establishing himself and what his key beliefs are, and really taking the battle to President Obama. And instead, he was in a reactionary mode for a long period of time. First with his own party, and then into the regular campaign.
Is the mainstream media, the networks, are they liberal in their reporting?
I think you can always detect a bias that tends to lean liberal in most of the media you see today, on a national level. Now, true that we have the extremes. MSNBC is probably perceived as the most liberal cable outlet, and of course Fox News on the conservative side.
Where do you put CNN in that?
I would put them closer to MSNBC, but I don't think they are as far off that spectrum as we might say MSNBC. And that's just my opinion. It's very hard to watch cable news. I don't watch that much of it because my spouse is the kind of person who will talk back to the TV set when she hears something that she feels was just not fair or off base, and so yes, I'd say there's definitely a slant toward a liberal, and I mean a liberal bias in the extent that I think television news closely affiliated with the entertainment industry. Entertainment industry tends to be more liberal. I think there's something to be said about that.
Where do you put talk radio into the mix?
Well, I think most talk radio, successful talk radio, is conservative.
Right
so
wing,
I would say it's closer to that end of the spectrum.
Now, Rush Limbaugh has called President Obama Santa Claus for giving away the house.
Yeah.
Do we live in an entitlement society?
I think that is one way of explaining the success of the Obama campaign. It wasn't the only thing that was
part of it.
Yeah, I think I've talked to a lot of people in the days since the election, and I think a lot of us found that if we could have taken some of the defense policy strategies of one candidate and some of the domestic spending policies of another, if we could have had a hybrid of the two, we might have had even a better candidate. But that's not what you get. You get what the two candidates represent, and you have to make that judgment. Is this the right way to go for the next 4 years? And hopefully, okay, the decision's been made, whether you liked it or not, we move forward. And that's why I have a lot of concern about whether or not Congress and the president can really get together on a debt deal.
You know what gets me is that with all the social media now, with all the outlets that we have, with Twitter and Facebook and the access that we have to getting information very quickly, it just seems as though back in the 60s and the 70s, the media for the most part was more aggressive. What isn't the media doing now that they should be doing, that they were doing back in the... I remember Watergate.
Right.
I mean, Woodward and Bernstein. Where's Woodward and Bernstein now? Where's the new generation of Woodward and Bernstein?
Right. Well, Woodward's making money on the side.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking
shows.
about those two, but where's the new version?
Right, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of that has to do with news used to be, and I think you and I kind of came into it at the very beginning of the end of news being seen almost as a lost leader for a network. And stations were just beginning to understand that, hey, if we invested enough into
But you look at these news conferences, whether they're local, statewide with the governor, or even when the president holds a news conference, the questions are lightweight. There's no Sam Donaldson there to yell out from the crowd, "Mr. President."
That's right.
Where are these people?
Yes,
is the media soft peddling this stuff?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of editors need to be more diligent about that inside newsrooms. And I did a lot of my work.
Why aren't they? Are they afraid to upset the establishment?
I think they walk into a news planning meeting with a newspaper under one arm and the ratings from the the Arbitron or Nielsen ratings on the other arm. There's definitely a market-driven aspect to today's media, and it has to be in order to be competitive. And then when you have this explosion of news, and you and I kind of came into the business as news was beginning to expand from. I remember we would just focus entirely on that 6 o'clock newscast, nothing else but the 6 o'clock news, and then they would rework stuff for the 11 o'clock news. It doesn't happen anymore. There's a newscast on practically all day, and that's just locally. You have that kind of look at it.
I guess when I look at news reporting, I'm not seeing a Woodward and Bernstein breaking a Watergate story, or remember the Pentagon Papers, New York Times. I'm not seeing stories like that. Why?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I think I'm as perplexed by that as you, because certainly newspapers have been under a lot of fire lately in terms of the economics, and
they're losing readers.
Yeah, and that's
Thanks
really
to
where
the
most
internet.
and that's where most of that stuff really came from, was from the newspapers. And you had you mentioned the New York Times, Washington Post.
Everything was newspaper driven back then. Now it's social media driven.
Yeah,
is it not?
Yes, and you have a lot of the what we used to call the investigative stuff really coming out of the social media sites and blogs and folks, and there's some question sometimes about, well, how much work went into that, how accurate can it be? But I mean that stuff has been around us for a long time,
right?
Including some of the newspaper stuff from back in the 70s.
I mean, now I'm looking at social media. For example, over the weekend, a longtime broadcasting friend of mine passed away. God rest his soul. But how did I find out about it? No one called me. I looked on the internet, and there it was on Facebook and Twitter.
Right.
Amazing how we get news flashes just like that in an instant.
Yeah.
And the problem is we don't know how much of it is true. That's the other problem, right, Steve?
That's right. That's right. Because you don't know. It appears on just because it's on a website, just appears on a blog. What kind of scrutiny did that story go through in terms of did an editor see that ahead of time? Did somebody question that?
Right.
And I still have fond memories of a couple of news directors I worked for who were diligent about that. I didn't necessarily feel that way when I worked for them, but afterwards you realize that's something you needed.
Quick phone call here before we go, because we've got just about 2 minutes left in the program here. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. What's your question for Steve Newvine?
Yeah. Do you consider today's journalists as equal to you guys? I know you guys are old journalists. You guys are old school. Do you consider them the same level as you guys?
Wait a minute. I'm not that old. Hang on. No. So do we consider ourselves as good as the new generation? That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, because everything's like real quick now.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd like to think that our generation did it in a much more thoughtful, deliberative way. We certainly had commercial pressures back in those days, but
news director would come up to you, Steve, you got a story. Where's your 3 sources?
Yeah.
You got 3 sources?
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like 0 sources, and put it on the air.
Right, put it on the air. And I don't know what's going on in our local newsrooms as with regard to that, but that's a concern that I would have, is just the scrutiny, the level of response.
We're almost out of time. Why'd you write the 2 books? We're not going to get into too much of this now, but we'll have you back to talk about these 2 great books.
Well, the newest one, Grown Up, Going Home, I wrote that because it's about my hometown. It's got a search. The last chapter of that book's about the search that I've had to find men who served with my uncle in Vietnam.
Okay.
And my uncle died 6 months after returning home from Vietnam. And it was like a family. It was really not a secret, but we didn't talk about it that much.
Yeah.
30 years later, I start looking for the guys who knew him as a friend and as a soldier.
And what else are you doing quickly?
I am
besides PG&E.
Yes. Well,
writing.
I write twice monthly column on MercedCountyEvents.com, and just wrote one on the top 10 things I'm thankful for around Thanksgiving.
I'm thankful to be alive and well.
Great. That's one of them.
Steve, always good to see you, and thank you for driving in this morning.
I appreciate it.
Come back. We're going
to
book you again, and we'll talk about these 2 books that Steve Newvine wrote here. Thank you again for being here on Connect with Me on this day, live from the showroom floor at Ventura TV. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to talk about that ice rink in downtown Fresno. Hey, do you go downtown to skate, or should they have put it further north? We'll talk about that. Take your phone calls tomorrow. See you then.